Hey mamas, welcome to Breastfeeding Relief with Bethany. We share incredible stories, tips, and breastfeeding ideas to help on your journey. I'm your host, Bethany Laverne, a lactation consultant and speech therapist who helps mamas with breastfeeding. Not all breastfeeding stories are the same, and we dive into those topics. Hi, welcome to the podcast, Allegra. How are you today?
I'm great, thanks. Thank you so much for having me, Bethany.
Oh, we're so excited. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and all your kiddos?
So I am a entrepreneur who works from home, and I'm a homeschooling mom to a 12, almost 13-year-old and a four-legged fur baby that I didn't breastfeed.
Okay. Awesome. So why don't you tell us about how your breastfeeding journey went?
So I breastfed for 3 years. And, I definitely walked the road less traveled when it came to, my pregnancy, my birth, my, the newborn stage, all of that. I live in Los Angeles.
Okay.
I owned a store called Green and Greener. So you can probably, I might not look it. I like to joke that I'm granola on the inside. And so, I had a very natural pregnancy. I had a home birth, even though I was what was it called? A geriatric pregnancy.
Okay.
Or advanced maternal age.
Right. Yeah. That's after 35 if people don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I was 36 when I delivered. 36. Yeah, that sounds right. Yes. I was 36. It's a while ago now. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to be 49 in days now.
Okay.
So I'm like, I have to look at this stuff. Okay. So I was 36 when I delivered, and I was an anthropology major as an undergrad. So for me, I constantly think about the fact that we really haven't changed that much in the last couple hundred years. Like our world has changed, but our bodies have not really changed. And so when I think of, I read a lot of books about pregnancy, but when it came to having a kid, there were so many different theories out there that when I heard this grandmother from a non-industrialized country, she gave her American-born granddaughter the advice, don't read the book, read the baby. And I was like,
love that.
Wait, all of these books can just go away now, because I just didn't know what to do. And I didn't want to not trust myself. Right. I felt like this is a pretty instinctual thing, I think, in a lot of ways, right? Not that it's purely instinctual, because I actually saw a really interesting video about an orangutan that didn't know how to breastfeed. And so the zookeepers, one of them was breastfeeding. Oh, you should include that on your thing.
I should. Actually, I read that article the other day. It was really great.
Yeah. So I guess some things, do need to be taught, but I just felt like, I want to be able to trust myself, because, oh my gosh, our society and like not trusting ourselves is so rampant. I was like, I just need to trust myself about this. And so I did believe that, breastfeeding just seemed like the most natural evolutionary thing. And, there's a lot of data out there in terms of how important it is, especially, in the beginning. And I actually had women around me who were breastfeeding until 4. And, again, I'm an anthropology. That's my mindset. I'm an anthropologist. So I don't practice anthropology, but that's just how I think. And the average age for weaning around the world is 4 years old.
Right.
So I thought to myself, well, I don't know if I'm gonna make it to 4, but I'd like to make it until she had all of her teeth in, because, just from like an infection point of view and a soothing point of view. And at that point, at 3 years, you're not breastfeeding a lot. It's almost like you're giving vitamins, right?
Sure.
It wasn't nutrition per se. It was like supplementary. But I ended up making it to 3 years because my daughter's teeth just came in really slowly. And I also reached a point where I felt like I wanted to have my body back a little bit,
Sure.
because at that point it had been a year of pregnancy and 3 years of breastfeeding. And yeah. And it was a wonderful experience. I mean, I've got a lot of boob pictures in terms of, my daughter, like me shooting a picture just like this. I mean, it was very sweet. I wouldn't say that I consider myself to be a particularly maternal person. And so I felt like having that skin to skin
hmm
bond. And so I don't know if I had much to add after that.
Okay. Yeah. So, I do want to say, the ADA recommends exclusively breastfeeding for 6 months, and then most moms stop around a year. And so can you talk about why you decided to do so much longer? I mean, you've kind of touched on it a little bit, but, how was that for you, especially with, I bet there was a lot of judgment if you did it in public.
You know, Los Angeles is a pretty relaxed place.
Sure.
So, in terms of the public, I didn't feel judged, but again, I just might not notice it because as you can tell, I'm not afraid of the road less traveled.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, even in Los Angeles, I there's not many people home birth. It's very, very rare thing
hmm
in general. And by the way, there's a lot of legal requirements around home birth. Like you have to be a you have to be a low risk pregnancy,
Sure.
all of, and also my midwives were nurse midwives. So they were medical professionals. So
Right. Okay.
it wasn't like I was rolling dice or anything like that. I felt very comfortable with my decision to home birth.
Awesome.
And especially because, well, anyway, that's a whole nother story. But um I did do a lot of reading around pregnancy, as I mentioned.
hmm
And one of the things that I came across, and this is interesting. So my father, it was a dentist, right?
Okay.
And one of the things that I came across was a hypothesis that it is best to breastfeed until the first tooth erupts because that creates a signal to your gut to start producing different chemicals in
hmm
order to start digesting food. And the hypothesis was that that might be why there are more food allergies prevalent because
Interesting.
we do tend to give food before the first tooth eruption.
hmm
And so I talked to my dad about that and he said, "Oh, that makes sense." And I don't know if you know this, but the last organ that develops in the child's body are the lungs, right? And when the lungs
Yes.
are developed, and they're not even fully developed inside, right? They still keep
hmm
developing for a while outside. But when
Sure.
they're done, that's what signals labor to start. And then you give birth, and when the baby's squeezed through the birth canal, it squeezes all the liquid out of the lungs.
Right.
And so when you think about all of the ways that that gets interrupted, and you
hmm
think about the high asthma rates we have,
Sure.
you just kind of wonder like, oh, I wonder if there's a connection there.
hmm
And so again, my anthropology background, I just kind of wanted to do things as un un what's the word when they interrupt, um they call it intervention. I wanted as
Okay.
few interventions as possible from
Right.
sort of start to finish of this
hmm
process because it's a closed system and I just
Right.
felt like, okay, I was born to do this.
hmm
And so let's give it a try.
Yeah.
And so I was committed to exclusively breastfeeding until her first tooth erupted.
Okay.
And then I did the I didn't like give her I did single foods, but they were, I forget, there is baby led feeding, I think is what it's called.
Yeah. Baby led weaning. Yeah.
Baby baby led weaning. Yeah.
hmm
I always thought weaning was such a weird word for that because, I wasn't weaning. So I call it baby led feeding, I guess.
That's fine.
And so I would give her hand size
hmm
amounts of food that she
hmm
could, just rah, 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 rah. Because again, the hypothesis is that perhaps children have choking issues because they learn to swallow before they learn to chew.
hmm
And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I gave her, hand-sized
hmm
slivers of mango and avocado and those sorts of things. And so I actually never cut up things small for her,
Okay.
like
Yeah.
even grapes, right? Which everyone like cuts up grapes because I did see like that she was really learning to use her teeth and she,
hmm
she never had a choking issue. So I felt like that worked really well. And it also just worked in terms of giving her foods to see her reaction to them, to see if there was going to be any sort of allergy issue. So she has no allergies. She's
Awesome.
never choked on anything. And, she's 12, almost 13, not the greatest oral hygiene, despite being the granddaughter of a dentist,
Okay.
because that's how this age is,
Uh-huh.
but zero cavities. So every time she gets a zero cavity report, I'm like, yes, this is why.
That's
And
awesome.
also how I ate while I was pregnant, right? I think that plays a big part in it too. But
Right. A huge role.
yeah, so I just felt like there was a lot of reasons to do it and not a lot
Mhm.
of reasons not to. I mean,
Mhm.
was it convenient? Not particularly. I
Right.
do live in a city that is probably more tolerant of these things
Mhm.
than other cities.
Mhm.
And again, I have a very practiced ability to be like, well, this is what I'm doing, people. So, I mean, I was in Beverly Hills
Mhm.
at a very high end hotel having tea with a girlfriend, breastfeeding,
Mhm.
you know. Um, so and I never had an issue. I never had anyone say anything.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's nice. Sometimes I feel like old grandmas in the grocery store like cover up or something. So, I think it just kind of depends on where you live.
Yeah.
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 Mhm.
And also if I'm sure that there's probably a way to do it that makes it clear that like I'm not going anywhere, right? So
Mhm. Yeah.
if you want to say something, go ahead, but
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
you just have to do it. Just go.
Yeah.
There you go.
And I think that depends on your personality, right? Some of my friends are
Yes.
very quiet, reserved, and they aren't going to breastfeed in public. It's only
Right.
home. We aren't going anywhere. Or
Right.
you bring like a bottle of with your pumped milk because they just don't want to do it in public. And that's fine too. That's part of my podcast is
Right.
not all journeys are the same, and do what's comfortable for you. And also if it gets to be too much, with going back to work, do what's best for you. Your mental health is
Yeah.
very important.
Absolutely. And
Um,
also too, not being stressed is very important, right? Because you don't want
absolutely.
to be putting cortisol into your breast
Mhm.
milk
Mhm.
constantly. So,
Yeah.
yeah, do what feels good to you, but also I do think that, when you're pregnant, try and set yourself up for success,
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
Like I started talking to people, I started asking, I said, you know what? Because I've never had a kid before. Apparently I'm going to need a lot of help.
Mhm.
I don't know what
Mhm.
that's like. So,
Mhm.
mom, mother-in-law, like, will you be on hand? And,
Sure.
so start talking early about
A-
it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm all about, getting in a support group with other moms that are also
Yeah,
breastfeeding. I did that and it was
definitely.
so helpful for my journey
Yeah.
because, yeah, we all would sit around and say one thing that was positive for the week and one thing that was negative, or I could use help on, or some suggestions, which was fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, La Leche League is
Mm,
very well established
yes.
organization. Most of my homeschooling, home birth, you know,
Hmm.
granola on the inside or outside friends were in La Leche League. I went to one meeting. I didn't feel the need, but
Hmm.
they all raved about it. And so
Yeah.
yeah, that's fantastic.
Hmm. Yeah. And again, it's not for everyone. So, yeah, no, that's
Find your
great.
group. Find your group.
Exactly. Find your people. Yeah.
Mhm.
So why don't you share with us, what was maybe one thing, that helped facilitate your breastfeeding more easily?
Um so I would say that so I wore my baby a lot.
Yes.
And I would say that at least in the very beginning, especially I had one of those stretchy type baby carriers. I think it
Hmm.
was called a Moby, but it's like the wrap kind,
Yes.
that jersey
Hmm.
material. I would I mean, it was like breastfeeding and covering her up at the same time. It was so
Hmm.
easy. My boob was right there. She could get on there. She was fully covered. I'm holding her. You could be grocery shopping and people wouldn't even know she was breastfeeding.
Right. Hmm.
So I would say that the baby wearing, and I also did it with the more upright ones as well when she
Uh-huh.
got a little bit older.
Hmm.
That worked fine. Like at that point, she sort of knew how to move my boob with her hands and she would get it into place. And
Uh-huh.
it was I didn't have to do anything. And then I could be hands free.
Right.
I know not all babies like to be worn. I was lucky that mine really liked being
Hmm.
in close contact with me. It made it super easy.
Sure.
Also just made it super easy to get things done. Like sometimes
Absolutely.
I feel like I don't know if I would have been able to even like use the restroom in the beginning without help if it hadn't been for the fact that she liked being worn. So I could
Hmm.
just put her on and use the restroom and it was no problem if
Yeah.
someone wasn't here to hold her.
Hmm. I remember vacuuming and baby wearing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, cooking, I did baby
Yep,
wearing.
I cooked.
Was the best. And it's interesting because there's one culture, I think it's in Thailand, where they actually have a ceremony when the child's feet touch the ground for the first time, because
Oh.
literally the baby is worn, you know, for I think it's 6 months or 9 months or something, but they have a whole feet touching ceremony.
Oh,
And
that's
so
cool.
it's just interesting to me where it's just like, sounds like pretty much every baby must be worn there then, because if their feet are never touching the ground.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Yeah. I was in the grocery store the other day and someone had, you know, one of the baby wearings, but it was on their back. And so I've seen that before, you know, been put on the back, and I'm like, that's really easy too. So yeah, it made it easier for her to grocery shop and not have the baby in front of her.
Absolutely. And I had one, not at first, like the jersey ones you can only do on the front, right? But then when they get a little bit older, and now they're all different, right? Like when I had my daughter, the ones that were outward facing were too narrow in the hips, so they wasn't recommended. And then also I guess you're not supposed to wear them on the back until their spine is a little more developed, so that they can kind of hold themselves a little bit better. But I could switch it front or back. And I mean, I carried her in that thing, you know, I gave up a stroller pretty early because I found baby wearing was easier.
Sure. That's awesome. Well, is there any last words you have for our audience before we go?
Yes, I do think so. I personally am not comfortable with like the boobs out sort of breastfeeding for myself, especially because I mean, you can't really see, but I'm a double D, right?
Okay.
So I'm breasty. So I found the perfect outfit scenario.
Great.
Which was a tank top with a loose necked blouse over it in a synthetic fabric with a pattern, right? Because I love natural fibers, but natural fibers and breast milk are not a great combination when it comes to washing. And then also if you have solids, right, they just stain really easy. So when I had that set up, I could just pull down my blousey top, lift up the tank top underneath. And so my boob was like wedged between these two pieces of fabric, and then breastfeed her. And then if I needed any extra coverage, I love scarves. Okay. And the nice thing about scarves too is you can have them in heavy or lightweight, right? Like they have those little like gauzy things. Right. And then I might just like pull that across like this just to, you know, give a little extra coverage to the skin, because my child didn't like the full coverage.
Sure.
Thing that kind of looks
I know
like
my kids would throw their arms off to like
she
push
just
it
be
away.
Like this, like, what is this thing? Poof.
Right.
And it was like harder to manage that, right? But when I figured out this setup, I just had, you know, 10 tank tops, and I had like 5 blousey tops, and I just boom, and then I had a couple gauzy scarves. So I don't even think people knew I was breastfeeding, because there was no skin showing.
Right. Yeah.
So it's possible to be very demure and still breastfeed, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I loved the tank tops. I wore one every day. I felt like I mostly had them in black, gray, and white, but yeah, I always thought they were super comfortable. They were easy to wear. It was built-in bra. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah. So happy to.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just want to encourage people to get educated and then, you know, give it a go. I really feel like the thing that really contributed to my success was just being so committed, because I just so believed in the benefits. It hurts like hell in the beginning. I mean, literally, I was like, oh my gosh, it feels like glass is being pushed through my vein, or whatever these are called, right? All the little vessels in your boob.
The milk ducts.
Like, that feels horrible. And then I did have a couple of times where, you know, I had a clogged duct, but you know, all you have to do is just breastfeed more during that time, and it cleared it up. So it wasn't like a process that was seamless, and I wouldn't say it wasn't without its, you know, challenges, but you know, the bonding time together was amazing. It was like I could feel the hormones being released in my body. I was like, oh, this is so sweet. And then just like the health benefits to my child have been really great. So you do I do feel like you have to kind of like burn your bridges a little bit, just be like, "Argh." And again, there's always going to be a percentage of people for whom it just doesn't work out. That's just, how things are.
Right.
But, if you feel like you can make it work and you think the benefits are worth it, then,
Yeah.
it's going to be a little tough in the beginning for sure.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, but hang in there, mamas. It gets better.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just normal. That's part of the process.
Right. Well, thanks again for your words and insight and advice. This is really going to help our mamas.
Thanks for having me and thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much for listening in. If you loved this episode, it would mean so much if you would share it with another mama or post on social media and tag me. I want to personally thank you for wanting to help other mamas. You got this. I'm rooting for your breastfeeding journey.